So I would say first, let's just acknowledge the sad disappointment and the hurt that here you are, something happened to you, and mom, who I think of as the person in our lives who would nurture and support us, didn't nurture and support me. The little girl in me wanted her to care and express some care for this thing that had happened and to tend to me. And when that didn't happen, it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. That's your story. That's also your past experience. Like, let's just add a little more validation in there. You're not just making this up as some story you tell yourself. There's an experience you had
Yeah.
accumulated as a child where that bucket of the need to matter, the need to be nourished and tended to in particular ways, that bucket didn't get filled enough. You adapted, you survived. I'm going to share with you a story, and I'm going to come back to your story. I'm going to share with you a story that I heard from Gabor Maté. It's in his book, The Myth of Normal, because I think it illustrates what you're pointing to here so beautifully, and I want to capture it. He talks about how when he was an infant, his mother was counseled by a doctor at the time that the infant was supposed to soothe himself through the night and not to pick him up when he cried. And so much of his infancy, as he describes it, he was this little baby who was hungry, who needed to be picked up, who needed to be nurtured, who was left to cry for long periods of time by himself. Later on in his life, he found his mother's journals, and his mother would write him letters at night about how her heart was breaking, how much she wanted to pick him up, but how she really, really believed that the most loving thing was to follow the doctor's orders and not spoil her child. And that she really wants him to understand and know how much this hurts her and how much this is breaking her heart and how much she loves him and how she's sacrificing all of this for his well-being and the tragedy of that. And he talks about how he has no doubt that his mother loved him, but that infant did not receive the love, did not benefit from the love that her natural instincts were telling us to do, because cultural norms inhibited her ability to follow through on an intuitive sense. And she was taught to give her authority away and to follow the expert of other people. And in the cultures we live in, we have to put food on the table. We have to work. We have a lot of things that take our resources away. It doesn't mean that our parents didn't love us and that they're not good people. And we can intellectually get that. But that's a separate conversation from when you cried. Who picked you up and held you? Who comforted you? How did they comfort you? Was there anybody there to comfort you? Did you, as an emerging little nervous system in the world, get those needs met or not? Because if it didn't happen for you, that will be encoded in your nervous system, and it will continue to affect your relationships today. And of course, there's a lot we can do today. We've learned a lot, and we are still learning a lot about bringing these states in our nervous system into our consciousness, processing, digesting them, bringing witnessing awareness now. There's a lot of healing work we know how to do now that we didn't know back then. So I tell that story just to illustrate and validate this part of you that you just noticed of, I have this old experience of not mattering, and it conflicts with my cognitive understanding that I did matter in the intellectual realm. I understand it, but it does not change the biology of my reaction and the pain that is still living in me of the times that I needed something that I didn't get. And this is such a gorgeous story about, here I am, something spills on me. Mom is distracted doing her thing, and suddenly I have all of this pain that maps onto this moment. All of this hurt, all of this disappointment, this flood of experiencing comes up in me because it is reminiscent of what I never got. And it created a core belief in me that I don't matter. And all of that unconscious material suddenly gets activated in this moment and charged into this moment. And how beautiful, you see this happening. And then you're like, oh, what I want to say is, why didn't you offer to help me? But that question is coming with the loaded pain of every single other time as a little girl that I was unconsciously asking that question. And I can feel the charge in me. And I don't want that to come into the conversation in the present moment with my mom, because I'd like it to go differently. And this is you becoming aware of it, connecting the dots, feeling into it. And so here are some steps from this moment. You work with that little girl inside of you. You work with that meaning making. You give yourself a lot of empathy. Of course, you would be wondering, of course, this triggers the idea that I might not matter. I have such a deep need to matter, to be tended to. And some of this is historic. I have a little girl in me who didn't get enough of that. And she's scared right now. This feels like a repeat to her. This feels like a confirmation of this never being available, of me not getting the thing. And so I'd work with that little girl. I'd journal with her. I'd take her for a walk. I'd go and collect her. I would tell her, your pain matters to me. Your hurt matters to me. I get the meaning that you made. I'm here for you now. I see you now, right? I'd get into a relationship with that part of me on the inside. And then I'd soothe her. And then I'd say, let's go check it out. Let's go check it out. Let's see what happens if we go back to mom and we say, hey, remember that time we were at blah, 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 and this thing spilled on me? Do you remember that moment? Because first thing I want to do is just check if she was even aware of what was going on, or if she grounded in that moment and say, what was happening for you in that moment? I was surprised, mom. Like, I was surprised you didn't tend to help me. And I'm wondering how to interpret that. What was happening for you in that moment? And let her tell me. But I'm imagining a conversation in that case with something like, what was going on for you? And then a reveal. Maybe it may be easier if somebody tends to get defensive to front load it with my intention. And if I want to do it that way, I might say something like, that moment, I noticed myself going back into a really old story in that moment when you didn't turn to help me, which is fine, mom. We can get to that later. But what happened for me is I had such a flood of disappointment and sadness and hurt. And I realized I was remembering all of the ways, whatever, I don't know how much you can go into that with her, but I was remembering the States as a little girl and noticing them getting flooded onto that moment. And I realized that in this moment, the thing that would be so helpful to me is if you could just give me a hug and let me know that I matter to you. The little girl in me just needs that from you right now. Could you just do that? Intellectualization is when I unconsciously and habitually go into my mind in order to avoid and numb out from my feelings. And intellectualization, much like rationalization, is a disconnected way of trying to come up with a fabricated reality to try and make myself feel something different. It is not grounded in truth. It is not grounded in what's really going on. It is not connected to the rest of my body. It is a dissociative escape. That's why we call it intellectualizing. I'm leaving myself. And I'm trying to help myself by coming up with a fantasy or a nightmare it's a defense against feeling. However, that's very different from the universal human need for accurate information and knowing what the truth is for another person and realizing that I have a gap in information and I need the other person to give me their truth so that I can ground and orient myself in what is real and what I'm making up. Your need for clarity, your need for information is life affirming, grounded. It's connected to your whole network of being. Your mind, the things that your mind is looking for is part of the ecosystem inside of you. It's not inherently bad. Having an understanding is not a bad thing. It is a absolute need of your system. You're wanting to approach the conversation in a way that feels natural, that is in your mother's language, that doesn't have her feeling shame or awkwardness or defensiveness or wariness, that you can get the information that you want and maybe elicit a little bit of care for how this impacted you without stimulating her defenses. I would say for you and me to know that you needed past tense. You needed support. You needed empathy. That's about going backwards, right? And telling your mom what you needed back then can be more painful for the other person to hear because there's nothing they can do about it. And it's going to feel to them like a criticism. They're going to hear it as a criticism. They're likely to move into, I didn't give you what you needed. And she may have her own parallel story. You didn't get what you needed. And she may have her pain story of, I wasn't able to give my kids what they needed. So when we're sharing our needs in nonviolent communication, I always recommend, to the degree that we're able, you share what you're needing now and how it could be met now. You don't want to do it as an analysis of how you didn't meet my needs back then. It's more like, this thing happened and I was surprised, mom. I was just surprised and a little hurt. And I just need to know now. You go to bat for the need right now. Yeah. I just need to know that you care. I just need to know that I just want to understand, like, were you distracted? What was going on with me? It would really help me right now if I could just understand what was happening for you. My need right now is for some information and some clarity. I would always go for those first and let the care be expressed in the way they tell me that, because people often balk. I see this happening in nonviolent communication communities of people who are practicing this a lot. They'll say things like, what I need from you right now is some empathy. What I need from you right now is some care. And I'm sorry, but the matters of the heart cannot be ordered up like that. The moment that you feel entitled to somebody's care and empathy, they're going to block it. And then they're going to be in a double bind because they actually were feeling care and empathy until you've ordered it up on the menu. And so be careful not to order that up. Ask for the information, ask for a conversation. And you can't make someone love you. You can create the conditions within which their care will be revealed. And that's what I would say is a wiser thing to be going to bat for than this strange thing that is happening in some parts of these conversations where it's like, and what I need from you right now is empathy. And I also need it delivered in this particular way that I approve of. And I also need you to use these particular words that I prefer. Like, I think that's doing a little bit more damage unintentionally than getting us the thing that we're really looking for. You're no longer dependent on mom to get that need met. And you can establish a new kind of relationship with her now as you bring these things back with what I hear as a lot of graciousness and generosity and care in what you're building with her now as two adults. So I wish you a lot of luck with that.